Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. Punishing the opponent when they hang a piece is important if you want to win. It is not uncommon that the hung piece is otherwise actually in a fairly advantageous position, if not for the fact that the square was defended. This is why the opponent moved it into that position. In a previous video, I talked about mate in one tunnel vision, and this occurred in this game. Worse, my tunnel vision in trying to set up a mating attack meant that I straight up missed the fact that the opponent had hung their queen. Not accepting the Botez gambit is rarely good. Please enjoy. All right, let's have a quick look at the review. So chess.com's algorithm, no, not the most accurate game. So myself about 70% and the opponent 62%. And in this game, I did actually fairly well over my opponent for most of the game. And then you can see this blunder near the end where it goes all the way back to equality. But luckily, I managed to win anyway. And the opponent sort of blundered, I think, a second time. So, good mix of relatively good sort of moves in this game, but some inaccuracies and mistakes from both of us as well. So let's now move on to the analysis. So in this game, I play with the black pieces and opponent with white. Now they lead with knight f3, which is unusual. So I can't play my usual, which is e5, obviously. So I decide to play d5. So move the pawns first, control the center, and apparently this is the Reti opening. Apparently it's one of the hyper-modern openings. They play e3. Here I decide to develop knight c6, defending that square, potentially allowing for e5. Now, apparently, this was not good for me. As you can see, plus 0.5, should have played e6. I'll remember that next time. I didn't expect that. I expected them to play d4. And so with that straight up push, I thought that was interesting. So potentially, of course, deflecting my center pawn, being able to then also develop their bishop. So obviously that is bad for me. And I thought, look, if they capture, that's okay. I could capture back with queen. So here I played bishop g4. Now, interesting to me, the better move apparently was straight up pushing the pawn to d4, which yeah, not necessarily expected for me. I suppose it damages their pawn structure because they capture. I can't capture that. Oh no, I could potentially capture that back, couldn't I? Yeah, so I can see why that was the best move. They now capture. I capture the pawn back with queen, and of course the development of their second knight, knight c3, wins tempo as I'm forced to move the queen. So apparently h5 was better, queen h5. However, I didn't like putting it there. I did consider that move. My concern here was simply that I might get my queen trapped. So I brought queen back to d7. Opponent plays bishop c5. The reason why d7 was bad is they could have put bishop on a b5, which of course then pins the knight. I now play e5. Opponent plays e4. I long castles. Opponent so asks what I'm going to do with the bishop with h3. I thought was probably best for me to start trading some pieces. Here they damaged their pawn structure, which was good for me, I think. And look at that, minus 2.5 already. So this was a sort of unfamiliar opening, I think, for both myself and the opponent. I now play f5, so I've got the opportunity here, defended, so that's looking pretty good. I develop my other knight to f6. They play bishop at d5 with an attack. I thought, yeah, that's okay. I think that's okay. Captures, and here I now capture that bishop. They capture back with the knight. I thought that was probably fine. I moved my queen out of the way just so that I'm not potentially at risk of a threat like that. And it also defends all the potential squares that the knight could potentially go to. So I thought this was still pretty good for me. Opponent now plays queen a4, which looks potentially scary, but I thought again was okay. This knight is well well protected. If they wanted to attack the c7 square, it's not entirely clear how they're able to achieve that, given that the queen would have to go here, and that's defended by the knight. And there's no obvious way the opponent can really attack my knight at the moment. Now, my thinking potentially here, even though it's fairly obvious, is that I can potentially line up some attackers on the weak f2 pawn, and that looks very, very powerful for me. So I play bishop c5, opponent brings their rook to f1, which makes sense to defend that pawn. I now bring another attacker on the f2 square. So attack, check, obviously can't take, given I can take back. Can only basically move in one of these two squares and then, another attack. So I thought this looked pretty good for me. I suspect they were going to move that pawn, and that's what they did. So they played f4. I thought I could capture. They captured back. Obviously need to move the queen out of the way. So Stockfish reckons that was better. Yeah, okay, fair enough. I thought this was possibly better for me. So they capture, which is fine. I capture back. So now the rook still controls the f file. Opponent moves queen to c4, and absolutely potentially very, very risky move that involved me seeing why, and I did not see why. But the reason why, if you look at self-analysis, is that knight to d4 is very, very powerful, controlling those two squares. In fact, if you look at the best move for white is actually to straight up sacrifice their queen. And the reason is, let's say they do something else. Okay, let's say they take what looks like a hanging bishop. Check. This file is controlled by the rook, so must move to this square, and then that would be checkmate, since that square is defended by the knight. So absolutely devastating potential attack there due to that queen move, but I didn't see that. Instead, I played bishop f2 with check. That's the only logical move. If they go the other way, there'll be a discovered check with a second bishop move. I now capture that hanging pawn. King starts to sort of shuffle out of the way, which makes a lot of sense. I now bring the rook here. So I thought maybe I could line up two pieces to attack that pawn. Now, I do need to be careful. So if that knight wasn't there, so the knight is the key to my defense here. If that knight wasn't there, the opponent has a potential mate in one attack. So I do need to be careful. Opponent brings their pawn to d3, which makes sense. I move my queen to g2, so now lining up also for the attack. Of course, that's defended, but moving that bishop, for example, there which will open up a discovered check. Opponent blocks with bishop d2, so that was good. Here I decide to do some exploratory stuff. So again, mindful that I need to be very careful. So that comes with check. Opponent moves forward, bring the knight back. They now move a rook, so I thought I can now try bringing the bishop. Of course, still defended. That square is still defended with check. And I was hoping if they make a mistake and move there, then now I've got a very good attack. So I capture that bishop, and then potentially there's also a lost rook. However, they make the right move. So king c2 is the correct move. I wasn't sure what to do here, so h5. So maybe I can sort of promote a pawn. The opponent now is running out of time. Look at that, 2 minutes and 4 seconds. And so it just does a sort of a blind attack. I was pretty sure that was bad for them. So capture. They've got a check, block with rook. Rook also defends. That's sort of defended multiple ways. I expected here that the opponent would straight out probably just capture that pawn. So I was, I saw, potentially, there's a potential attack there. And so the opponent completely sort of took me by surprise with that king move to b1. And I thought, oh, capture and mate in one. And I was so enamored by that, didn't see the fact that their queen was straight up hanging. So there's the blunder, straight back to equality. And there's the check. And there's the check. And the problem is I can't even capture back because they have pinned that knight to my king. So forced to move the king out of the way to b6. Here they do another check, 23 seconds left. Luckily for me, that was an obvious mistake because, their queen is hanging. And at this point, the opponent actually opted to resign rather than wait for, the inevitable, because I did see that they hung the queen a second time here. And the game ended. So good game for the opponent. GG. I've found that sometimes when an opponent makes a move that I have categorized in my mind as impossible, like hanging their queen, I don't recognize it as such in the game. In this game, I had simply mentally prepared in my mind that the opponent would move their queen somewhere, and if they didn't defend their bishop, then I would capture the bishop, setting up a mate in one threat. When they didn't move their queen, I didn't register that I now had the option of capturing their queen with the rook, which was the entire purpose of blocking the threat with rook e7 in the first place. Luckily for me, the fact that the opponent had only seconds left on their clock and facing a mate in one threat meant that they hung their queen a second time and they resigned. This was pretty lucky for me. I hope you enjoyed this video and thanks for watching.